we live by. It's what made this country get great. It's what made this nation the envy of the world. And these guys pass it aside for personal gain. Shame on them. Shame on them for taking those principles, for taking those beliefs and trampling them so that they could pad their pockets, so that they could redistribute wealth to the richest of America. That is not the founding fathers' principles. That is not what this nation was founded on. And we've got to get back to the ideals that made this country great. I believe what we've seen in the past 7 years is a subversion of the bedrock principles of public service. You have to understand, in a representative democracy, we have a responsibility. A responsibility that says you are given the honor, the right, the duty to represent people when they need help, when they're working hard, they're trying to piece their lives together, they're trying to take care of their kids, they're trying to build wealth in their families. They need you to stand up for them. This administration has not done it, and shame on them for not standing up for the ideals of the founders. I really believe that if you look at this nation, where we're at today, we've lost our way. When I was 10 years old, I read Bobby Kennedy's book, To Seek Newer Worlds. If ever an individual understood the power and the importance of public service, I believe it was Bobby Kennedy. He talked about building wealth. He talked about the power of the human mind, of the human spirit, that as Americans, given the liberties and the freedoms that we enjoy, that we can do anything. It wasn't just that we could go to the moon. It was that we could conquer illness, that we could become the beacon of hope for the world. It mattered to him. He reached out, and as a 10-year-old kid, I read the book and went, there is somebody out there that cares, somebody out there that gets it. My mother repeatedly told us kids that she could have been, I suppose, upset, and she could have been bitter at the lot in life that she inherited. Raising 8 kids alone was not easy. But she never gave up. She never, ever once that I saw, was bitter, was disappointed, was angry. Instead, she told us, as she told us once, she told us 100 times growing up, if you have one thing in life that you do and you succeed at, please do not, on the day that you lay your head on the pillow for the last time, do not look back and say you did not give more to this earth than you took away. It is a solemn responsibility as an individual in the human race. It's a solemn responsibility as an American. It's a solemn responsibility because you've been given gifts by your Creator, and you need to exercise and honor those gifts. And she was right. I believe it sustained her as she raised kids. She told me one time, she said, you know, Steve, I went to bed one night when I was 20 and I woke up when I was 50 and I realized I just raised 8 kids. That's what I did with my life. And I said, Mom, that's the saddest story I've ever heard. And she said, no, it's my story. She said, it's the greatest honor you could have to raise children. I think I've done a pretty good job. I said, well, present company excluded, you did okay, Mom. But she understood service comes in many varieties. Please go out and do good and do right because we need to. And part of what we need to do as Democrats to do right is we have to participate, we have to write checks, we have to vote, we have to work because we have to take back our government. In our America today, I believe that we need leaders once again who believe in this power, the power of humanity, the power of our spirit, the power of our minds. I believe we need leaders who understand that to those to whom much is given, and namely a nation that's been given more, much indeed is expected. It's a responsibility that we should embrace. We need leaders who understand that we have a responsibility to lead our lives with dignity and respect. We need leaders who understand that the great nations are only as great as the least among us. If we lose sight of that, we become what George Bush has become. We are better than that. We owe ourselves, we owe our country, we owe our state, we owe our citizenry better than that. We need leaders who understand that when one man or one woman is suffering, one man or one woman is facing discrimination or being repressed, that we are all facing discrimination, that we're all suffering, and that we are all oppressed. Those aren't just words. Those are ideals we should live by. We have people in Washington right now that have forgotten. So why is public service and electing Democrats so important in 2008, more important than past years? Because let me tell you about the America that George Bush has created. And if we don't take it back, I cannot fathom what 4 or 8 or 12 or 16 years of Republican control in Washington at the executive branch will do to this nation. I fear for it. This is George Bush's America. Since 2001, George Bush has decided that he could use the American credit card and run up a debt today that is unprecedented. Under George W. Bush in the United States of America, in the last 7 years, we have added $9 trillion in debt. It's not debt that we're paying. It's debt that our kids and our grandkids are going to pay for the next 50 years. That's wrong. Think of the number, $9 trillion in 7 years. That is more debt than any president in our history. And let me go one step further. That is more debt accumulated by one president, George W. Bush, than all previous presidents combined. That's the inheritance of George W. Bush. And don't forget, when people tell us as Democrats, it angers me when they say, you're the party of fiscal irresponsibility. I beg to differ. In fact, somebody had told me that a couple years, I might have thought might be true, I don't know. So I checked. Went back, the Second World War on. The average annual deficit run up by a Republican president in the United States of America on an annual basis since the end of World War II was $132 billion. And that is not taking George Bush into the equation. $132 billion. The average annual deficit by a Democratic president since the end of World War II is $31 billion. 132 for the Republicans on average, 31 for the Democrats. Democrats, if we ever let a Republican tell us that we are the party of fiscal irresponsibility and they are the party of fiscal responsibility, shame on us. Do not let them get away with it. And remember, too, that the last president to leave office with a surplus was a Democrat, Bill Clinton. Left office, we had a $557 billion surplus. His $230 billion surplus in the last year of his administration was the largest surplus ever left by any president in the history of the United States of America. That's a Democratic president, and that's Democratic fiscal responsibility. So how did we accumulate all this debt? Well, part of it, honestly, was a cynical plan to redistribute wealth. And indeed, under George W. Bush, we have seen the largest redistribution of wealth in the history of humanity. Not just the United States. No nation has ever seen such an unprecedented shift of wealth from the middle and working class to the richest of America. Of George Bush's $2 trillion tax cut, 43% went to the top 1% of the wage earners in America. That is wrong. It shouldn't have happened. They didn't want it. They didn't need it. And we need to reverse it. Of that same tax cut, 55% went to the top 5% and a mind-numbing 87% of the $2 trillion tax cut went to the top 10%